Hi guys, I'm just putting this video together just to explain my techniques for our Friday Zoom class. I just thought it might make it a bit easier if you can see what I'm doing, and then you can have a practice just to get in the flow of this wet in wet technique that I'm going to use for this tulip. So I'm going to be painting the left hand side petal of this tulip, and what I want to do is mix up the colours that will be used to paint that left hand side tulip. This first colour I've mixed up is just quinacridone magenta, and you can see it is on the inside of that left hand petal. On the outside of that left hand petal we've got a softer pink. So I've mixed up that colour as well on my palette, as you can see, and it's also quinacridone magenta, but it's got a little bit of cobalt blue added into that, and it's a softer pink. So with this darker colour, I'm also going to put a little bit of indigo blue just at the top right hand corner of it there, just to darken a little section of that, because there is a little darker section at the very top of the tulip, and I can use this too. So if you mix your colours up first on the palette, it's always good, because then when you do your wet into wet technique, you've got the petal that's wet and you've got your colours already mixed up, so you can just draw from those colours already. So this puddle here is my quinacridone magenta with a little bit of cobalt blue, and that just gives that a really nice, it's not so bright with the cobalt blue, it's got that little bit of blue added there. So what I will do is I'm going to rub my lines back a little bit because they're a little bit dark. I'm doing voiceover here, guys, so I'm a little bit out of sync. So you might want to just rub back your pencil lines so you can still see them, but just so they're not so dark, because some of these watercolours are staining, and once you've painted over the pencil, sometimes the pencil doesn't rub out. I find it's probably worse with colours like yellow, not so bad with the pinks. But what I'm using here, it's a number 6 synthetic brush. It's got a really nice point, and you can just get them at the cheap shop. They're not that expensive. Now I've got some clear water on my brush, and what I'm doing is I'm just painting in clear water to the entire surface of that left hand side petal. You just want to try and get it nice and even, try and get the nice edge down the side, the left hand side of that petal. Now you don't want it sopping wet, but you don't want it too dry either. You want it to be able to have enough water on there so you can drop the paint in and control the paint and push the paint around evenly. If you're new to this, you might just want to have a play on a bit of paper, scrap paper, watercolour paper, at wetting in, even if you draw a circle, drop your water in to that circle, and you don't want to have it like so there's puddles of water, but you've just got like this nice sheen of water, and then pick your paint up and drop that in, and you'll see the paint, it's beautiful. It just flows into where all the water is, and you can actually control it with your brush by lifting paint out, dropping paint in. So I'm spending a bit of time here just getting my water all nice and even, and you can sort of tilt your head and look at the paper on the side, and you can see that sheen. You can also see a bit of that sheen now. So I'm picking up my pale mix onto my brush, and I'm going to run the brush from the tip of the petal all the way down on that left hand side, and I'm actually drawing down the edge of the petal, come nearly all the way down to the bottom. And I'm sorry the glare, can't see the can't see it as good as I'd like you to. So once I've done that, I've washed my brush in the clear water, dried it off, and I'm just going to bring that brush down the center of that petal just to wipe, still drying my brush, there's a highlight down the center. So I'm just bringing my brush down after I've washed the paint off it and dried it down. I've brought my brush down the center just to bring that highlight in. Now I can fill my brush with the nice dark quinacridone magenta, and I'm going to drop this in down the right hand side. You just want to have a look on your reference photo, and you're just painting your darks and your lights where you can see. I'm dropping that down in there. Don't want to go all the way down the bottom because the dark sort of fades off to nothing. But because my paper's wet, I'm getting nice soft edges. So now I'm washing my brush out, and I'll dry it on the cloth. Get all the moisture out of your brush. You don't want to have any moisture on your brush. You want to dry it down. Now I can use this brush to control that paint. So this bit that's sort of bleeding at the bottom, I'm going to pull it up, and I'm pulling my brush up just to soften that edge. So I've got a nice soft edge. Now I'm going to wash my brush again, dry it off, and I can play with the paint and move it where I want to. So I can soften that edge off down the bottom. Oops, sorry, my hand's in the way. And I'm just playing. While the paper's still wet, I can play. So I'm softening that edge again right up the center to create that highlight. Each time I lift my brush off the paper, I'm washing it out in clear water and drying it off again because I don't want to put a dirty brush back down. So I'm just sort of softening that edge again. And just keep going till you're happy. I've still got that little splotch down the bottom there, but that doesn't matter. Wash my brush again, cleaning up that edge. While that petal's still wet, I can still add paint. So I'm just looking at the top section of the flower, and I just want to darken that up a little bit more. So I'm dropping a little bit more of that quinacridone magenta into the top of the petal and running it down just to darken that up. This is the first glaze, the first layer. We're going to come over this when it's dry and add more. But while the paper's still wet, I can drop some more paint in. So I'm just washing my brush off again with clear water, drying it down, having a look, assessing the situation. Now I'm going to use this point of the brush to pull the paint across, and I'm actually drawing in those little lines on the petal. I'm using the paint that I've just painted in. It's still wet, and I'm pulling it across just to create those little lines on the tulip. I'll take a photo of this and show you guys so you can see a better view. So I think that's about it. I'm happy with that. I'll let that side dry and come back over and do another glaze later. So the next step is I want to do my right hand side petal. What I'm wanting to do now is mix up a colour to paint the right hand side petal, which is quite purple, quite dark. So I'm adding more of my quinacridone magenta, and to that I'm adding some indigo blue. I want to go quite dark because that petal is quite dark. So I'm going to mix up this colour and check it out on my paper to see if I've got dark enough. And I might add a little bit more indigo blue to that. It usually always dries lighter than what you've got it mixed. But see, this is our first glaze. We can always come back and add more depth to this colour later on. So I'm going to add some water to my right hand side petal. Now just before we start there, at the base of this tulip you can see that we've got the yellow that sort of merges into the petals above that. So I'm going to wet right down to the bottom of the petal, but just remember you don't want to bring the paint all the way down to the bottom of the petal. You want to leave a gap there so you can paint the yellow in. So I'm happy with that mix of that dark paint. So I'm getting some nice fresh clean water on my brush, and I'm going to paint clear water into that right hand side petal. You just want to try and be as neat as possible because you've got these nice crisp edges on the outside of the tulip. You can fix them up after, but if you can be neat from the beginning, you don't have to fix them. But it is hard to get like that really nice crisp edge. So I'm dropping in this clear water into the right hand side of that tulip. And you don't want too much water on there again, remember, but you do want enough water so when you drop the paint in, it's going to spread quite evenly. So I'm loading up my brush with this beautiful dark purple, and I'm starting from the very top, dropping that in, and very gently painting that into the water, following those nice lines down. It really does help if you've got a really good brush with a good point. And I do find the synthetic brushes better than the fur brushes or the sable brushes. The synthetic brushes tend to hold their point better. They tend to be stiffer, so when you're doing nice edges, you've got more control. And I guess it's a personal thing, but I've used both and I tend to like the synthetic now a lot more, and they're cheaper and they last longer, so I think it's a win-win. So what I'm doing is loading up more paint on my brush, and I'm just going to keep painting down this petal while the petal's still wet, still got water on there. I can afford to play, so I'll keep dropping more paint in and painting down that right hand side. Now what I want to do when I get to the bottom here, I don't want to have the purple just cut off to nothing. I want it to have a really nice soft edge because the bottom of this petal merges into the nice yellows that we've got on that right hand side. And I'm just painting that little point in up the top there. Look at your reference photo, copy your reference photo. I'm dropping more darks into the top there because it's quite dark. Bringing more paint down. And what I was going to say before, because I'm doing voiceover here, so I'm not up to date with coordinating with what my hand's doing, softening that bottom edge, so we will get there. We're there now. I've just washed my brush with clear water and dried the water off my brush, and I'm just pulling that paint down into the water that's on the paper because I want to soften that edge. I don't want it to be a hard edge. So just soften the bottom of that edge and you can pull that paint down in. Now I'm picking up some pink and I'm just adding a little bit of pink up to the top. As you can see on your reference photo that there is a little bit of the paler pink on the top there. It's not as dark. So I'm just adding that. Washing my brush down, and if there's any other little adjustments I need to make while it's still wet I can, but I'm pretty happy with that. So we've got our left hand side petal which is in the light and it's nice and soft, and then on our right hand side we've got the nice deep dark colours. So the next petal we'll do is the center one, but I think that'll do for now, and I'll see you in Zoom class. Really looking forward to our first proper class. And if you would like to practice at home at dropping in your paint to your petals and see how you go, and you'll be set for class. Thanks guys, take care and see you next Friday. Bye.